everyone, and welcome back. We're going to be diving into something really fascinating today.
Yeah.
It's how our brains tell the difference between, the world moving around us and us moving through the world.
Right.
It's something that we all do every day without even thinking about it, but the science behind it is pretty amazing.
Yeah, it really is.
So we're taking a look at some cutting-edge research from the Sainsbury Wellcome Centre at UCL.
Okay.
It was published in Cell magazine just this month.
Wow.
And it's really going to change the way you think about your brain.
I'm excited.
We're going to learn that our brains have like this built-in motion calculator.
Okay.
That's way more complex than we ever imagined.
So this research is really exciting because it dives into what we call the motion source separation problem. And essentially it's how your brain figures out, okay, am I moving or is everything around me moving?
Okay, so that makes sense. That would be important to know.
Yeah.
But break it down for me a little bit more. Why is this motion source separation problem such a big deal? What would happen if our brains couldn't figure this out?
Well, just imagine walking down a busy street if you couldn't tell if you were moving forward.
Oh, God.
Or if the buildings were suddenly coming at you.
Yeah, I can see that being a problem.
Yeah, you'd probably end up walking straight into a lamppost.
Or another person or something, yeah.
Exactly.
It's like that scene in Inception where the whole city folds in on itself.
Yeah, it would be pretty trippy.
Yeah, that's a good point. So how did these scientists actually figure out how our brains do this? Like, it's not like they can just crack open our skulls and peer inside, right?
They can't do that.
Okay.
So they came up with this really clever experiment using a system called the Translocator.
The Translocator?
Yes.
Okay.
So picture this. A mouse is running on a treadmill inside a virtual reality corridor.
Okay, so like those VR games that we humans love, but for mice?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Tiny little mouse VR headset and everything.
That's adorable. I love it.
But here's where it gets really interesting. The entire treadmill can move forward along a track.
Wait, so the mouse is running and the treadmill is also moving?
Yes.
So it's like running in place, but also moving forward at the same time?
Exactly.
Wow, my brain already hurts.
I know it's a bit mind-bending, but that's what's so ingenious about it. This setup allows researchers to isolate different aspects of movement
Okay.
and see how the brain responds to each one.
So that's super clever.
Mm-hmm.
So they could have the mouse run on a stationary treadmill first,
Yes.
which isolates like the pure motor signal of the mouse's legs moving.
Right.
Okay, and then they could passively move the mouse on the treadmill.
Yes, at the same speed as it was running before.
Oh, okay.
And this isolates the vestibular signal.
Which is the signal coming from the inner ear that tells the brain about like changes in head position and movement.
Exactly.
So they're basically separating the sensation of movement from the actual act of moving the legs.
You got it.
Okay, I'm following you. And then the really cool part is they could combine those signals.
Right. Yes. They could have the mouse actively run while the treadmill was also moving forward.
Wow, so that's really mimicking what it's like to actually move through the environment?
Precisely.
So they're giving the mouse's brain all the different possible combinations of movement signals.
Yes.
That's brilliant.
So then to see what was going on in the brain,
Yeah.
they used these really tiny probes called neuropixels probes.
So like microscopic little listening devices for brain cells.
Exactly.
Oh.
And they focused on the primary visual cortex.
Wait, the visual cortex?
Yes.
I would have thought that kind of motion processing would happen somewhere else.
Most scientists thought that too.
Huh.
But they found that these neurons in the visual cortex were actually responding to all three types of motion signals.
The motor signal, the vestibular signal, and the combined signal.
You got it.
Wow, so the visual cortex isn't just passively taking in what the eyes see. It's also getting real-time updates on how the body is moving through space. That's incredible. It's like our brains have this inner GPS system that's constantly feeding information to our visual system.
That's a great way to think about it. And what's even more fascinating is that the neural activity was almost identical, whether the mouse was actively running and being moved forward by the translocator,
Really?
or just running in place on the moving treadmill.
All right, so that seems kind of counterintuitive to me.
Yeah.
Shouldn't the brain be able to tell that those are two different situations? I mean, in one case, the mouse is actually covering more ground.
That's a good point. You would think so. But remember, the visual input is the same in both cases. The virtual corridor is moving past at a certain speed, regardless of whether the mouse is actually moving forward or just running in place.
Oh, okay, that makes sense.
What researchers think is happening is that the brain is essentially subtracting the expected sensory feedback
Okay.
from the mouse's own movement.
So it's like, it's saying, okay, I'm running, so I should be seeing the world zip past me at this speed. Let me adjust my perception to match.
Exactly.
Wow. So even though the mouse is physically moving different distances in those two scenarios, its brain is creating the same perceptual experience.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
And this actually helps explain why we don't feel dizzy all the time when we walk or run.
Oh, interesting.
Our brains are constantly taking into account our own movement and adjusting our perception of the world accordingly.
So it's like our brains are running a constant simulation, predicting what we should be seeing based on how we're moving,
Right.
and then comparing that prediction to what our eyes are actually seeing.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
It's this incredible loop of prediction and feedback that allows us to move through the world smoothly and without constantly feeling disoriented.
This is blowing my mind. I always thought that our brains were just passively receiving information from the world,
Yeah,
but this research suggests that they're much more active than that.
absolutely. Our brains aren't just recording devices. They're constantly interpreting and making sense of the information that they receive.
Yeah.
And this research shows just how complex that process can be.
This is incredible. So where do we go from here? What other questions does this research raise for you?
Well, for me, it highlights how adaptable and resilient our brains are. Think about it. We're constantly bombarded with sensory information,
Yeah, that's true.
but our brains are able to sift through all of that and create a stable, coherent picture of the world. This research gives us a glimpse into the mechanisms that make that possible.
It really makes you appreciate the power of the human brain.
It does.
But it also makes you wonder if there are other ways our brains are playing tricks on us
Oh, for sure.
that we don't even know about yet.
Absolutely.
What about the practical applications of this research? Could this knowledge be used to improve things like virtual reality experiences?
I think so.
Yeah.
One of the biggest problems with VR right now is that it can cause motion sickness because the visual information doesn't always match up with what our inner ear is telling our brain. But imagine a VR world where your brain was tricked into thinking you were actually moving.
Wow.
No more motion sickness,
Yeah.
and the feeling of presence would be incredible. This research could be the key to making VR feel truly immersive.
That would be amazing. It seems like this research could have a huge impact on everything from entertainment to healthcare.
I agree. For example, this knowledge could also help us understand neurological disorders that affect movement and perception, like Parkinson's disease.
That's a really good point.
By studying how these brain processes work in healthy individuals, we can gain valuable insights into what might be going wrong in cases of these disorders. And that could potentially lead to new diagnostic tools and therapies.
This is also fascinating. I have to admit, though, some of this is starting to make my head spin. It's hard to wrap my mind around just how much is happening in our brains all the time.
I know what you mean. It really is humbling.
Even for something as simple as like walking down the street.
It is, but it's also incredibly exciting to realize that we're only just beginning to understand how our brains work.
Yeah, it really is incredible to think about all that's happening in our brains without us even realizing it. It's like there's a whole hidden world up there.
It is.
Yeah.
And this research could also be really valuable for other fields, like robotics.
Oh, yeah, like how so?
Well, imagine designing robots that could navigate complex environments as smoothly as humans do, all thanks to a better understanding of how our brains solve that motion source separation problem.
Yeah, that's true. That would be amazing. We could have robots helping with like search and rescue missions or exploring dangerous places or even performing surgeries.
Exactly.
Yeah.
With a level of skill and adaptability that seems like science fiction right now.
It really is groundbreaking. It makes us rethink how our brains work.
Right. For so long, we've thought of the brain as this passive receiver of information from the senses.
Yeah.
But this study really shows that the brain is much more than that. It's constantly building and updating its own internal model of the world based on our movements and past experiences.
So it's not just about what we see and hear, but about what our brain expects to see and hear.
Exactly.
That's pretty profound stuff.
It really is. It makes you wonder how that model develops over time and how much it affects our behavior.
Those are some really deep questions. It makes you realize that we still have so much to learn about how our brains work.
Absolutely. We've only just scratched the surface.
Yeah.
But with every discovery, we get a better understanding of just how complex and amazing the human brain really is.
Well, dear listeners, next time you're out for a walk, take a moment to think about all the incredible things happening inside your head. It's a reminder of just how powerful our minds are. And who knows what other amazing secrets are waiting to be discovered.
That's the beauty of science. There's always more to explore.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, everyone. Until next time, keep those brains buzzing.